And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, Perlis Plaza, East Lansing, Michigan, Michigan State University, Michigan State football camp, full gear, full blast. Day 2 today of full pads. Yesterday, Monday, in pads. Spent a little time in the stadium to practice a little bit. Joe Rossi, defense coordinator, was out here talking about that. You can get that. You can watch that video here, the Spartan Mag channel. Give us a like, subscribe to the channel, get information, get updates on when we're doing Spartan Mag Live and those type of things. Spartan Mag got the VCast going on right now. Paul, Rossi was out here talking a little bit about Michigan State and the things that they've done thus far. They went and they tackled a little bit. They had 2 periods of live football tackling in the stadium, and he said that they're going to be scrimmaging. We knew they'd be scrimmaging in the stadium this weekend, whether it's Friday or Saturday, and he said that they wanted to go in there and have a practice in the stadium so that the scrimmage was not their first time in the stadium. That's interesting. I never thought about it that way. I'm not sure they did it that way, but maybe, or did it that way in the past, but maybe an example of a second-year coaching staff wanting to have a couple of periods in the stadium before the scrimmage to get everything they can out of the scrimmage. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it just seems strange to me that you do it on the first day of practice. That's what makes it different, practice in pads, in that, you think that you're working up towards it a little bit. You go thud and some of the other stuff, because there's only a limited number of times where you can actually have, tackle periods in practice. So it's a little bit different, but maybe it also creates – I know that playing in the stadium, practice in the stadium creates a little bit of extra out there, so maybe that had something to do with them, giving a little bit more spark, giving these guys a little bit more competitive edge. But it was something different. The guys seemed to like it. The guys that we talked to today, now all those guys that we talked to today were veteran defensive players. Wayne Matthews, Quindarius Dunnigan, and Darius Snow. Those are all upperclassmen, so they've been through this before. I'm sure it was a different type of experience for some of the younger guys that are going through training camp for the first time.
On the message board at SpartanMag.com, the Underground Bunker message board, people have asked me about things that I've seen from different staffs from different years. I've been doing this for 30 years, so you see different things. One thing I've noticed this year, even more so than last year, the offensive line, the intensity, the things that they're working on, when they do reps and they're fitting things, or, there's working against defensive linemen who are their own offensive linemen. So offensive linemen work against offensive linemen, and during the drills, the offensive lineman presents his line mate with a defender, a dummy defender, and the defensive, what you do on defense as an offensive lineman to help your teammate is much more intense than I've ever seen. And Michalczyk will get on your rear end if you are not giving a good showing as a defensive player. For instance, if me and Paul are 2 offensive linemen and we're going and we do a drill, and then next we get out of line for a second, then we come in, then we're the defensive players for the next guys doing the drill. And he will chew those guys out on defense if they're not giving a full look. And the offensive linemen, when they play defensive players, are more physical, Paul, than I've ever seen here. I don't know what that's going to equate to, but I was watching Christian Phillips today. I mean, he's given a lot of effort as a defensive dummy to give his teammates a look. And I know they're probably trying to get to that last year, but this year I'm just seeing it more pronounced.
Yeah, because last year we saw guys get lit up on occasion for not giving a good presentation, but this year there's a higher expectation that everyone's going to do it and do it at a higher level. And I think that's, you want to go back to being a good teammate, to present that skill. You're helping your teammate get better, and so if you want your offensive line to be the best version of itself, the best thing you can do is give 100% on the other side of the ball, and knowing that's one of those Jim Michalczyk rules. Maximum effort and being a good teammate. It's equivalent of, like in baseball, of a teammate throwing front toss. And
doing it right.
And here's the thing: I think it's such a valuable. Like, we come from baseball, softball backgrounds. It's such a valuable skill. One of the worst things you can do as a teammate, if you're a baseball or softball player, is half. Not do a good job throwing front toss, or or helping someone out, or loading the tee, or whatever you do, soft toss. If you do things that, to the best of your ability, you're maximizing those practice reps, and I think there is going to be a value to that, but it just shows you. I think it shows you how far along they are in year 2, because I don't think this is a new thing for Jim Michalczyk. I mean, I could tell last year, and a couple times I saw guys get lit up for not doing the right thing, that there's an expectation. Now, I don't think that the expectation was as ingrained as it is this year. I think that bar is a lot higher, and I think those guys are buying in. And the competition level on that offensive line, I think, is to the point where if you're not doing those type of things, that's going to be a mark against you, and it's going to count when all those tally marks are added up.
And I think there's more wear and tear on offensive linemen than any other position, because in order to do it right, you're constantly having those collisions. They might not be 100% game type of collisions, but everything you do. And then when they break down into pods and they go against actual Michigan State defensive linemen, there's no way to work offensive linemen unless you're thudding over and over. And just in college football in general, you see shoulders and clavicles and guys retiring from football, taking their medical at that position. That's why you need about 20 of them on scholarship. But offensive linemen, man, they're churning. I was watching Phillips again, jogging to the end of the line and jogging here, jogging there. I always wondered about his conditioning level. I think his conditioning level is the best. I guarantee it's the best it's ever been right now, and I'll be curious to see what he can do, because I know he's competing for that starting job at right guard, and no matter who wins that job, the second stringer is going to get in there. But Phillips, I continue to see him developing. As far as other things going on with coaches doing things I've never seen before, I mentioned this before when we went and had some lunch. Blue Adams, they had a drill today where the defensive, the corners were kind of just doing like a hip turn, speed turn, or like quarter turn and then a speed turn, sometimes a speed turn, sometimes not. And they're getting depth for a deep shot to make an interception on a deep pass. And I guess you could do it in a jugs machine, but, Blue Adams can throw it a little bit, but he's not going to throw it 60 yards like some guys you're going to see in the Big Ten. So this particular drill was about, you get a chance to intercept a deep ball, finish it. So you got to practice it to get better at it. And some of the guys don't have the greatest hands in the world, but they were getting better as the drill went along. Here's my point. Blue Adams was throwing the football for this drill from the tower. He was up in the scaffolding, which is about 3 stories up there, and he's throwing moonshots from the scaffolding. So these guys, it took some adjustment on their behalf, but again, it's not something that a position coach can simulate. And they were bringing a game situation to a drill. That's something I've never seen done here before. I think we'll have the video of that here on the channel, but that's something different. I'll have to go back and look to see who was doing a better job catching it. And there's some guys dropping it too. It looked more difficult than maybe the players might have thought initially. I'm not sure if that's the first time they've ever done it, but that was interesting today.
The value of it is that obviously you'd love to catch it, but the value of it is getting used to having those balls in the air from those type of angles. And I really think there's only so much you can do with the jugs machine, because the jugs machine doesn't really replicate the natural movement. It's interesting. You go back and you're talking about like the competition level, or guys going hard in practice, guys jogging. I see the same thing from the Michigan State assistant coaches when they're switching in between drills. Lengy Suyanoa, defensive line coach, is out there running around changing pads out there, and there's a real sense of urgency throughout the. Man, that's a crappy ringtone.
It's Hockey Night in Canada.
I don't like it.
I don't know that. Well, people who grew up in the Detroit area know that. Go ahead.
I like. You a big CBC guy?
Yeah.
We used to get that at school because we had so many Canadians on campus. But yeah, I thought there's a lot of hustle on the part of assistant coaches. The general sense of urgency in the movement level was high today. There wasn't guys taking plays off. There wasn't any stragglers, and I guess you'd expect that on the second day of practice and pads. But I do get the sense that team wide that there is an emphasis on not taking any second off in practice, because they've got a lot of work to do, and they're determined to use every moment, every practice to get where they want to get.
Hope I don't get a copyright strike on that from YouTube, because usually when songs are on there, I don't know if that song will be copyright or not. I know the funny thing is they had a big schism between Hockey Night in Canada, and because they lost the rights to that song to TSN, so we might have to blank that out. You won't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, as far as player development goes, Joe Rossi was talking about they've had to redo the whole stand-up, the edge position, because when they got here, they didn't have anybody that really fit that particular role, stand-up, edge, rush. It's kind of a traditional defensive end, but they like a longer, leaner guy that also has to drop into coverage once in a while. You saw that at Minnesota, some of the tall guys that they had at that position. So this year they went out in the portal, added a couple of them. Isaac Smith coming in from Texas Tech. Rossi said that he moves a little bit better than they thought, or than they saw on film. And Isaac's a guy that's had some He's been in and out of the lineup a little bit in the past. Had some really strong flashes at Texas Tech in some big games, bowl game against Arkansas. Whether he can sustain it, Michigan State can certainly use that. Cam Williams coming in from Georgia State, a guy that I think is more of a depth piece. But Rossi said today that he's a little bit more stout and stronger than they anticipated. And we continue to hear good things about Jalen Thompson. And we saw some film, talked about it on the Underground Bunker message board, some brief clips that the university released. And I just saw Thompson with some takeoff, wrist club. They always work on their hands, but it was a real nice clip. Turning the corner, ankle flex to turn the corner with some speed. I know it's just one clip, but I was like, wow, there's some progress there. And teammates and coaches are saying that increasingly about Jalen Thompson. And I think it was Rossi that said that, sometimes a player just plays for a season and just, I don't know what his exact words were, but
does his job,
just kind of functions. But now Thompson's getting to the point where he's does his job plus. Starting to become more of a, I don't know if difference maker is what you want to call it.
He described it as making plays.
Making plays. And that's as a down defensive end. We've heard a little bit that he's played a little bit as that stand-up edge as well. They experimented with that last spring, did not end up doing it in the fall. This year they're back to doing it a little bit again. And Jalen Thompson, I think, is a guy who's making some strides. Much needed, whether he's a stand-up edge. Obviously, you can also get pass rush from the down defensive end position, which last year didn't get a lot in that category from that position. But between Thompson and Dunnigan, I think there's going to be more productivity from the down defensive end position, and Thompson may be spilling over to that edge as well. But Thompson ready to make a move, Paul.
Yeah, and then going back to a couple things that you just following up on a couple things that you touched on. Cam Williams, yeah, Rossi said that he's got heavy hands. He's heavier handed than he thought he was, and he did mention, as you said, that he's stout. And then the Isaac Smith is about as tall and long a defensive end as I can remember being here in a lot of years.
6'6".
We'll see how that works out. But some of that length, going back to what you said about the Minnesota defensive ends, that is a type of guy that they like. So there are some pieces. I feel like they think that they've got obviously more depth. We don't know if that's going to lead to more productivity. I also thought a guy that maybe, I'm not going to predict big things for him, but a guy that stood out to me a little bit in drills was Tyler Gillison, a guy that did not play last year, transferred from Cincinnati, was injured throughout the whole season. I thought he looked pretty good to the point where I did double-check my roster a couple times just to make sure that that's who I was looking at. I'm not predicting huge things, but any of those guys that can make a step in the right direction is a good thing for Michigan State. They've got more guys, and second year in the system, will that lead to to more productivity in terms of the pass rush? I don't know, but one of the guys you just mentioned was Quindarius Dunnigan, and he looks a lot more fit. And just seeing him today at the podium talking in interviews, he strikes me as more confident in himself, in his craft, and I would expect him to make some plays as a second-year defensive lineman. He readily acknowledged when he was being asked questions, I think in response to a question that you asked, that he didn't have the consistency in performance that he would have liked to have had, and it was a big adjustment for him coming from a Middle Tennessee State where he did not face the high level of competition on a game-in, game-out basis that he faced playing in the Big Ten, and that was a huge adjustment for him. Hurt his confidence at times.
He added some weight last year for the adjustment, and he felt like he didn't add the weight the proper way, so he's leaned back down a little bit.
He blamed himself for that too, because he said it was stuff that he took upon himself before he got here to get some weight on, and now he's doing it with under the supervision of the strength and conditioning staff.
And Rossi said he likes what he sees in Dunnigan. Last year, this time, 12 months ago, I was talking about Dunnigan being a guy that could have an impact based on a guy that was second team All-Conference in Conference USA moving up. I thought he could do that, but we didn't see the quickest version of him. Now we might see a quicker version of him, but he might be second string, which speaks to an overall defensive front seven that Rossi is pretty confident about. Something else that he's confident about that we've been hearing about, and we wrote about it all last week, and everybody else did too, and that's the wide receivers. And Rossi said we've upgraded, I think, did he say big time in the receiver room for a defensive coach to acknowledge that and to, I can't remember his exact words, but there were some pretty strong adjectives. He likes what they go against every day in terms of the wide receivers. We keep hearing that over and over, and it's Omari Kelly, it's Bullard, it's Evan Boyd and Krishan McCray. A complete facelift at the wide receiver position, and it's consistent. So I'm eager to see what that's going to look like on game day.
The thing that has him so excited about that is it gives his defensive backs a real look at what they face against good teams in the Big Ten, and what he feels like. And the other thing he said is, they're winning some battles and we're winning some battles. So he's excited about the upgrade in talent in the wide receiver room, but he's also excited about the ability of his defensive backs to compete against those guys and win a lot of plays, because that's important too. I'm sure he'd feel less good about the wide receiver room if his DBs were getting beat on every single play.
And an underrated part about the pass rush, Michigan State's pass rush last year was not good. 5-6 straight games without a sack, which was, college football hadn't seen that in several years. Everybody knows how unproductive the pass rush was in terms of sacks. One of the underrated parts about a pass rush, something Saban used to always talk about, is you want to get push on the interior. You want to push the pocket and push the quarterback off his point from the interior, whether a defensive tackle gets there or not. If you get him moving, it can really knock him off his point and have a big impact on your pass defense. And Rossi said today, among other things, he liked the push they were getting from the defensive tackle position, which to me is not a surprise. I think Michigan State's got some good defensive tackles. I don't know if any of them are stars in the making. Maybe Big Worm is, Ben Roberts, but Van Sumeren's around for another year. Satchel's around for another year. Buckley has got some size. But when you've got that many, and the kid from Florida State, Brady, I forget his name, number 16, when you have those guys coming in, you got like five and a half defensive tackles. They're going to be fresh, and that defensive tackle pushing the point on the interior is another area that I think that's going to be improved this year. Rossi touched on it today, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's a solid point. I'm not saying that they're going to be, backfield wreckers in there, but it's going to be better than last year.
Yeah, Grady Kelly's the guy that you're talking about from Florida State, and then Mike Sean Beeler is a guy that Rossi mentioned, and he also mentioned Derek Simmons, who I wrote about last week.
Tackles. That's 6.
That's a luxury. You're not going to see all those guys on the field necessarily unless there's injuries, and it seems like you're talking about the beat up factor with offensive linemen. The guys are going to get beat up. Defensive lineman, interior defensive line is the same way. If you've got 6 guys that are functional plus, it's a good thing to have. I don't know if I'd rather have 2 stars and a bunch of guys that are almost functional, but I think Michigan State's in a good spot right now in terms of doing some of the things that they want to do to stop the run, with having some guys with size on the interior and guys that are improving technique wise.
2 people mentioned Brady Pretzlaff. That's where I got the Brady on the brain from. Rossi did, and so did Wayne Matthews, talking about players that are making an impact. And Matthews said about Brady Pretzlaff, quote, he's going to be a guy, unquote. When you have a teammate saying that, that's impressive. Brady Pretzlaff, coming in from Gaylord, Michigan, as a 4-star recruit, initially committed to Minnesota, decommitted, flipped to Michigan State with Rossi when Rossi came from Minnesota to Michigan State. Pretzlaff is going to be backing up Jordan Hall. He's going to get some playing time, but he's looking good for the future. But that's another good quality second string type of guy. The second string merit, the second string this year is better than it was last year. I think it's safe to say that's going to be the case on defense and other positions. Pretzlaff looking good for the future. And when Rossi was asked about other younger players, you'll be touching on this with an article later at SpartanMag.com. Mentioned Justin Denson, Beeler, Mekshon Beeler from Chicago Simeon, redshirted last year, athletic defensive tackle. Derek Simmons, like you said, and Aiden West, corner from Maryland, who came in and did some good things at the outset of spring practice, then sustained an ailment that knocked him out for the rest of the spring, but he's back in it. So he was asked about some young players that are making a mark. Those are the ones. So you're hearing about some of these young guys coming up, second-year recruits that these guys recruited and signed last year. Some optimism, Paul. There's some player development things going on. They're starting to gain traction.
That's a big thing for Michigan State with the kind of the things that Jonathan Smith wants. Obviously, you have to use the portal. It's a tool. It's not going away. It's something that you have to use effectively. But they want to be a player development program. And when you hear good things about young players like that, it's indicative that is in fact the case. I mean, we talked about a lot of the guys offense. Last VCast we were out here because there's a lot of offensive coaches, but there's a lot of young players out there that we're starting to hear their names, hear them more frequently, and those are good signs. Doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to make a huge impact this year if everyone stays healthy in front of them, but Pretzlaff is a guy that to feel good about, for the future, and he's also a guy that, like when you have those young players that are taking big steps, the guys that ends up showing out on special teams, and that's really important.
All right, as you know, Paul, Michigan's recycling rate has fallen from 90% to 73% in recent years. Michiganders are squandering about $105 million per year by not taking back their bottles and cans. That's hurting our environment. So help the environment, help yourself. They're your lakes, your beaches, your roads. Take them back. Take those bottles and cans back. That's a message from Schupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. Paul, you've been taking them back?
I have, man. I have, because I've told you, like Sam's done with his Eagle project, but we keep on getting can donations, and those will help to fund it. Still about $500 over budget, but that's all right.
That's nice. Okay. All right. So Wayne Matthews, he's excited for himself. He came out here and spoke. Played last year's third down role, pass defense. I thought he did all right in pass defense, third downs. He did himself. I don't remember him getting undressed a whole lot. I thought he was pretty solid. Not good enough to be an every down inside linebacker. This year, Spartan Mag is projecting Jordan Hall and Wayne Matthews to be the starters at the inside linebacker positions. Matthews just said no in the system for a second year. That's another theme we heard a lot today, as you would imagine. Second year in the program. He's not thinking as much. He's able to play faster. That's something that he wants to do better this year. So Matthews is excited and optimistic, and I think he's got a good chance to start there. Darius Snow is in the picture. I know Darius Snow started when they went with a 4-3 defense for 2 games at the Sam position, but like as it was in the spring, he played Sam and inside linebacker this year, which he's done in the past, doing it more this year. So Snow is in the picture, but I think it's Matthews. I think it's Matthews and Hall to start, but there's going to be more linebackers playing. And I think did we mention Jalen Satchel when we talked about defensive tackles a minute ago?
No, we should have.
He just walked by. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a guy that's played a lot of football. I thought he had good snaps. He had quality snaps when he was in there. Another guy that came from a small school program that, should be better playing at this level, but to play this Big Ten schedule, this 9-game Big Ten schedule, you've got to have quality depth on the interior defensive line. In the transfer portal era, that's the hardest thing. One of the hardest things to do is get that kind of depth. And I think Michigan State, between good talent evaluation in the portal, player development, I think that they've got some good pieces.
I think I'll reiterate what I said on Tuesday. I think Michigan State's going to be a pretty good, respectable team this year, and I think there's going to be a lot of those teams in the Big Ten. They're in that category. So the record might not look great for some of these teams. Like Wisconsin's going to have a real hard time getting to 6 wins. Could be a pretty good team. It's going to be hard to get there. I mentioned this on the message board a couple days ago. If you take Michigan's schedule and gave it to Michigan State, I think Michigan State goes 6-5, maybe 7-4, not counting the Michigan State game. Michigan plays Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland, back-to-back in November. I think they might be the only team in the Big Ten that plays Purdue and Northwestern, the 2 worst teams in the Big Ten. Now, they've got some, like they play Washington at home, which could be tricky for them. They're going on the road to Nebraska, on the road to USC like Michigan State is. Those are some tricky games, and both Michigan and Michigan State might find a lot of trouble on those road games, USC and at Nebraska. But I think Michigan State's going to be a respectable team and in a lot of games. Childs, we're hearing good things about him. Matthew says, or maybe Darius Snow said, he's not sure Childs has thrown an interception yet in camp. He's doing better with his reads and so forth, which he needs to do. We're not really sure what that's going to look like. Not sure what the offensive line's going to look like. But I think Michigan State, there's going to be a lot of credible teams in the Big Ten, and I think Michigan State's going to be one of them.
Yeah, I think the big thing for Michigan State, I'll go back to what I've said all training camp, but for them to really get to that point, because I do think you're right. I think they're going to be better in a lot of different areas. I think they've got much better in the skill department as far as big playmakers, and I think having explosive downfield receivers is going to open some more things up for tight ends, and that type of thing. But the thing that I'm going to be watching, I think the thing that's going to be kind of a governor or a ceiling raiser for Michigan State is run blocking operation, running the football. So the better Michigan State is at running the football, the better their chances are of getting serious progress in year 2 in the Jonathan Smith era.
Yeah, and the running back thing is something that we have not heard much about. A lot of times we don't go fishing for names a lot. We want to hear the coaches' volunteer names because then it's a little more organic. I've not asked about, Tao Tolliver or Frazier or Tullis. We're hearing a lot about the wide receivers, but nobody's saying anything about the running backs, which I'm not sure is a great sign.
And I'm not sure if you should hear too much about the running backs before they have their first scrimmage. I get what you're saying, but like until you get out there and you're running, because the defensive guys we're talking about, like they're not going to be able to scrimmage until they get their third down package. They started talking about that a couple of days ago, and they've been installing that type of stuff. And you're going to be installing stuff all the way up until the scrimmage. That first scrimmage is when you kind of get it. You'll kind of get a better idea maybe of whether Michigan State feels like they've got something at running back or in the run game operation or not. But to me, it all comes down to like run blocking. Sometimes at first scrimmage, the defense is ahead of the offense. I think it would be a really good sign if Michigan State's offense did some things in that first scrimmage. But I think the intel we get on running backs, I'm not sure that I can believe what I hear until there's a couple scrimmages there, because it's really hard to judge a running back without the pads on.
All right, we'll wrap it up now. Anything else, Paul?
No.
For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. I've been watching the VCast from the Perlis Plaza, Michigan State University, with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.